Hey, what's going on? Today I'm going to show you how to download all the images from a web page with JavaScript. I recently had a client reach out to me and ask me to recreate a bunch of landing pages, and some of these pages had quite a bit of images on them, and the client didn't have like a folder of the images to supply me, so it was kind of on me to just go through, grab all the images from the pages that I needed to recreate. So instead of doing that manually and right-clicking on each one and opening it up and saving it, I just wrote a quick script to do this. Now, there's plenty of ways to do this. You can, there's even other ways with JavaScript to do this. I'm going to show you one way. There's also Chrome extensions for this. There are other probably snippets of code out there, but this is for educational purposes, and hopefully you learned something. So the first thing I need is I need the image elements themselves from the web page. I can't download anything if I don't know the URL of it. So to get the URLs of these images, I'm going to need to get the image elements off of the document. So first thing, we're going to say const, we'll say image URLs, and we'll do, let's see, we'll do a new array. So we'll say array.from, and then we'll say document.query selector all, and let's select all image elements. Now, something else that I want to go ahead and do here, actually, well, let's start there, okay? So that's not going to be image URLs, right? That's just going to be a bunch of image elements, right? So we see we have an array of 11 image elements, okay? So with YouTube specifically, there's a couple of extra things that we have to add in here because YouTube has some kind of odd image elements. Some of them don't actually have source attributes, and so one of the things that we're going to want to do is we want to make sure that, so first off, just demonstrating, if we were to look at any of these, let's say the fourth one, and we just look at the source, right? We got a URL. Like, this is the URL we're after if we want to download the image, right? If I click on this, oh, that's my avatar, okay? So for us to get this, we're going to need to filter out any kind of URLs that don't actually have a file extension in them. So we actually want to make sure that whatever URLs we're grabbing, that it has a .jpg, .png, .gif, .webp, something, so that we, pages like YouTube, stuff like that, that maybe for whatever reason doesn't have the actual file extension in the URL. I want to go ahead and just ignore those. So that's really specific to YouTube. There might be other pages out there that have stuff like this, but just for simplicity, I want to make sure that I'm only attempting to get URLs that actually have image file extensions at the end of them. So the first thing we're going to do here is write a. First off, I'm going to just see. I'm going to copy and paste this actually because I already have an array here of the extensions that I care about. Now, it's perfectly valid to, for a URL not necessarily to have an image extension, but the server still return an image. We're not accounting for that in this situation. So if that's something that, whatever page you're trying to do this on, if that's something that their servers do is like return URLs, even though the request URL doesn't actually have a file extension on the end, then this will need to be modified. But for us, we're just going to go ahead and filter out any URLs that don't have these extensions. So we have our image URLs here. We have the image extensions. We're going to write a quick helper to get the file extension from a URL. So say get file extension. This is going to accept a URL, a string, and we're going to, we're actually going to return a string. And what we want to do is take in a URL, and then we want to return just the .jpg or .png, etc. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to return a period, and then inside here we're going to write an expression, and we'll say first off, let's take the URL in. Okay, so this one, for instance, right, or any of these, but we'll say URL. And then we'll do a split. Now, the reason that we're doing a split here on a question mark is because some URLs may have query parameters in them. So if I just did a split, I could do a split just on the periods, right? and then just grab the last index of of the array that of elements that had a period, right? So presumably that would always be the file extension unless the URL has a query parameter. So you're going to have a question mark, and then you'll have a bunch of query parameters after that. So I actually want to split on this first. I know that the question mark in a URL is the mark of the start of query parameters. So when this splits, I should get two, right? The first will be the URL from HTTP up until the question mark, and then the last part will be the query parameters. So I actually want to grab the first index of this, so I'm going to say 0, okay? And now the next thing we want to do is actually split off of this. So now we've got the actual URL that should be HTTP, whatever, through some file extension, or what we're looking for to be a file extension that may not be. All right, so what I want to do now is split again. And I'm going to split on the period. And then lastly, I'm going to, this is going to give me quite a bit, especially if there's a bunch of, we have periods in the host name. We might have periods elsewhere in the routes. But we want to grab the last one always, because the last one should, if it's a file, if it's an actual image extension, if it's an actual a URL to a file that actually has an image extension, it will be the last part of the file, or the last part of that URL, right? So we'll just say .pop, because .pop will return the last element of an array. So right here we have a URL, we split it so it becomes an array, we grab the first index out of that array, which is going to be the actual web address from HTTP up until any query parameters, if there are any on the string. Then we're going to split that, and we're going to grab the last index of the array that this split creates, which will be a .png, .whatever, or .something, but then we're going to test to see if that's actually a file extension. So just to show that this works, like if I were to take, say, this here and get file extension, obviously, this is not a file extension, right? This is just, it's splitting on the .com because that is the last dot in here. If I were to, now this is actually a kind of an odd URL here too. I don't see a file extension, so I don't think we're going to get one here either, right? But if we say, look in here some more, how about this one? Get the source. Actually, the first thing, or what we can do, is just say image URLs dot filter, and that's going to give us the URLs, and then let's just return any that say get file extension image.source, and let's say it equals .png. None. Okay, how about JPG? Perfect. Okay. So then we'll just map that so we can actually get the URLs real quick. So we'll return the image.source. All right, so now I'm going to grab the first one off of that, and here's one with .jpg in the URL. Okay. So we kind of just inherently proved that get file extension works because we tested to see if the source had JPG. But just so you can see, get file extension, we'll pass that string in, and you see I do have a query parameter here, right? And then I have .jpg here. So again, my code will split first this whole string on the question mark, which is the start of the query parameters, and then it will grab, so that gives us an array with two indexes, which is this and then this, sorry, question mark up through here. I'm not sure why it's highlighting up there. I have no idea. That's a Chrome thing. Okay. But we have two indexes. Then we grab the first of that, right? So that's going to be just this part right here up to .jpg. Then we split that again on periods. So then we're going to get an index here. We're going to get another index here. And then we're going to get another index here. So the last index will be this .jpg. So then we say .pop to return the last index of that array. Okay, so we get this, and then we get .jpg. My end state here that I want, the goal here is to get an array of image URLs to download, right? So I'm going to just reassign this image URLs, and we're going to do much of what we already did. We're going to make a new array from document.querySelectorAll, and we're going to get all image elements. Okay, now on this, we're going to map this. Okay, and this is going to give us the image, right? And if we want to, we can go ahead and destructure that element and just grab the source here. Okay, so image is the entire image that we're mapping, or the array we're mapping over is giving us a bunch of document elements, right, or objects. So all of these objects, these elements have properties. One of them, the one we're after, is going to be src because we want the image source property. So we're just going to destructure it since it's just an object. And then we're going to return an object here. Okay, and so if I put in parentheses, it's just allowing me to kind of in one line return an actual object literal. Versus this is in contrast to like if I just had braces here, then I'd have to come down here and return an object, right? Instead of that, I can just wrap this here and it says, hey, return an object. And we're going to return source, okay? And now, if you're not familiar, this is shorthand for this, okay? So we're just putting source. Let's just see what this looks like real quick. Assignment. Oh, well, image URLs is a const because I declared a const earlier. So let's just refresh the page because that's the easiest thing to do. All right, hit up a couple of times. Let's, actually, I'll just copy and paste where we were. Okay, so I have my image extensions array. These are just the ones that I care about, any URLs that end with this. I've got the get file extension helper that I already wrote. We've already been through this. All right, and next, this time I'm just going to do a let on image URLs just in case we want to reassign it. And I will go ahead and just copy and paste the part up until we had completed. Okay, so array.from, get all the images, then we're going to map over that array, and for each image element we're going to destructure the source property out of that object, and then we're going to return an object with the source. So this will end up being an array of image sources. Okay, so if I say image URLs, we have 11 here, and you see we got src and a bunch of URLs. So again, YouTube has some odd ones here. So you see like we have sources empty on a couple of these. And then obviously you also saw the ones where the some of the URLs don't actually have an image extension. Now, that's not to say they aren't images, but we don't care about those in this case. We're just keeping it simple here. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to keep what we had here, image URLs, but instead of stopping here, we're going to do a filter first, and we're going to filter. This is going to give us, again, remember, this array is it's an array of objects now, and each object only has one property, which is src, okay? So if you recall, it's the equivalent of this, right? So now that we have an array of objects, each object having a source, we're going to filter that array, and that's going to give us the same array of objects. So we're going to go ahead and we will destructure the one property that we know is actually in there, source. All right, and we are going to go ahead and make a block here so we can do some conditionals. And what we'll actually do is, first off, we want to make sure that source is actually there, right? So we could do something like this to say, like, if it's not there, if it's falsy, then don't return it. So this actually would remove the two empty ones, right? So now we have 9 instead of 11. And that's because an empty string in JavaScript is falsy, right? So all this is doing is converting source to a Boolean, and then converting to the inverse of that. So this is the equivalent of taking this and converting it into each of these and converting them into true or false. Okay, and since this is falsy, it's false and doesn't actually get included in the array after the filter. I believe we could also just do return source here. Yeah, so as long as it's truthy, because again, empty strings are truthy, are falsy in JavaScript. Okay, so the last thing that we probably want to do is, let's just, in this filter, we can also filter out anything that does not end with a file extension, like that we actually care about, right? So we already have our image extensions array up here, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say return source, and we're going to add on to this expression here. We're going to say return source and image extensions dot includes. Okay, so this is array.includes, which will actually scan through the array and tell us if this array includes a given value. And the value that we want it to scan for is get file extension, and we're going to pass that source. Okay, so this is a little bit hard to read because of it being all jumbled together. That's a little bit easier maybe, right? So just see, we're going to say right here, we start here, right? We grab all the images. We then, you see another pair of parentheses here, so we create an array out of that. From that array, we map that array. We destructure the source property from each of the image elements that gets passed to us, and return just an object with the source. And this gives us an array with a bunch of objects with just one property source. Then we filter over that array. We know the source is there, so we just destructure that out of this callback. And then we return any items that actually have a source, so it's not just an empty string. And that source, the URL, has an actual file extension that is included in our image extensions array. Okay, so if we hit this, that takes us down to 6. All right, so now we actually have 6 URLs, and we know that you can actually see right here, these all end in .jpg, okay? All right, so now we have our URLs. Now it's time to move on to actually downloading the files, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is make a new function. We'll say, call it download image, all right? And this will take in a URL and a file name that we wish to download it as, or save it off to disk as. What we're going to do is use the fetch API to fetch that URL, and then that's going to return a promise, so we're going to wait on it. When it's finished resolving, we'll call the .then. That will give us a response, and then response has a method on it called .blob. So this is where we can actually convert it into just a set of binary data. All right, so now this is going to return another promise. All right, and let's see, when it resolves, we'll take in the response. We're going to actually create an anchor element on the page and add it to the page, but with a display none, so we're not actually affecting any styles or anything that you're actually seeing on the page. We're going to add a hidden link, and then we're going to give it a download attribute, and then we're going to simulate a click on it to actually initiate the download. Okay, so we'll say document.create element, and we want to create an anchor element. Okay, next we will say link.set attribute. So we want to set a download attribute on this, and we're going to set that equal to the name. Okay, so when this link is downloaded, it should be downloaded with this file name as the file name. All right, then we're going to do href, and we'll say we're going to use the URL in JavaScript, and we're going to create an object URL. This will actually take that blob, and it will create a URL that's scoped to the current host name, so that we can actually give that URL to the anchor as its href, so that when we simulate the click, and we have the download attribute on there, it will actually trigger a download to download that blob. So what we need here is we need, now that we have an href, we actually want to set the href to href, link.href equals href. And then we want to do a link set attribute. And we're going to do target, and we're going to do blank. So we download these in new tabs. And I did attribute, whoops, set attribute. And then we're going to do a link.click. Lastly, when we create an object URL, in order to avoid any kind of memory leak in the application, we want to also clean that up whenever we're done with it. So that's revoke object URL, and we'll call that with the href. Now, there's a bug where, for whatever reason, Firefox needs this wrapped in a set timeout. So we can wrap this. Whoops, actually hit enter there. All right, so paste that there, and then we just want to give this, we can do a 0 here. All right, and now we have a download image function. And lastly, we're actually just going to loop through each of our image URLs, and for each one, we're going to download them. So actually, before we download the images, there's one last thing that we want to go back and do. Okay, so I'm going to hit up a few times here, and you see we have our, where we actually updated our image URLs variable here. There's one more thing I want to go ahead and do here, just to make it a little bit simpler. So I'm actually going to, let's see, I'm going to try to make this a little bit bigger. Okay, and we're going to say, I'm just going to try to put this on another line just to try to make it a little bit easier to read. All right, so we have an array. We're grabbing all the images. We're mapping over. We're grabbing the source out of each element, returning an object with just a source. So now we have an array of objects, each object containing one property called source. And now we're filtering that. We're making sure that the source actually isn't just an empty string, and that the source ends with a file extension, an image file extension. The last thing we're going to do here is map again. Okay, and I'm going to make some room. And I want to go ahead and grab the source out of this. Okay, and I'm also going to go ahead and grab the index so that we can use it to create a file name. And next, I'm going to return an object. Now I'm going to do this shorthand here again to where we just return an actual object literal by wrapping it in parentheses. All right, and I'm going to return source, and then I'm going to return another property called file name. I'm going to do a template literal here, and we'll call it image dash, and then we'll use the index here, and then after that we will add the file extension to the end. So it'll be image-0.jpg, image-1.jpg, etc. Okay, hit enter. So now I still have 6 because I just mapped over it, but now the shape is source and file name, image0.jpg, image1, and so forth. All right, so now we are ready to loop through our URLs and download them. So image URLs dot for each, and that's going to give us an image. We can actually go ahead and, as we know, destructure those properties. So we'll take the source and the file name out of each one. All right, make a block here, and we're going to say download image, and we'll do source, and we'll do file name. And I missed a parenthesis. Don't you love that? All right. And you see image 0, image 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so if I open any of these, there it is. There's that thumbnail. There's another one, and so forth. All right. So to recap, when we want to download the images from a web page, we want to get all the image elements. We want to then get all of the source attributes, the URLs of the images from each image element. And then we can use the fetch API to loop through all of those URLs, download them, convert them into a binary blob, and then create a temporary object URL for that binary blob, and then actually create a hidden anchor link on the page and set that binary blob as the href, and then trigger a download by simulating a click event on that link. That's everything we just did. If you want to see the full code here, I will actually show it to you. So here is and we actually removed this at the end. All right, so this is the full snippet. If you are just looking to have something, I can also put a gist in the description if that would be helpful. If anybody has questions or trouble with this, I get that some of this can be a bit hard to read here, right? So I can actually even make this a little bit easier, maybe. Right, dot filter, dot map, yeah. All right, so that's it. It's about 29 lines, and then if anyone has any problems with it, just let me know, and I'll be happy to help. Thanks.